Move my orchid.
Okay, there you go. Welcome everyone to the Sex, Love, and Addiction 101 webinar tonight with Rob Weiss. And we're thrilled you're all here. A little housekeeping information. The Q&A button across the bottom, you can ask questions and Rob will answer them. Probably if you ask a specific question, he's going to answer in a general format so that it's a generalized answer to the question, but we love questions. We typically run out of time at the end. So if you're thinking you have a question, go ahead and throw it in there now. The chat feature, someone used it because there was some audio difficulty. That kind of thing is fine, but for questions, if you can put them in the Q&A, that'd be great. I'm going to do this. Rob doesn't know I'm doing this, but his new book, Prodependence, launched last Tuesday, and it's #1 on the addiction category on Amazon. So yay, people are finding it really helpful. So he works so hard on it. I swear, writing a book is like giving birth. Not that Rob would know, but I know what a job it is, and I just wanted to. It's pretty exciting. We're pretty excited about that. So I just wanted to share that. So without further ado, I'll let you get.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rob Weiss. I'm a social worker, a sexologist, an expert in the area of intimacy disorders, sex and love, relationship addiction. And you're here related to a site that we've developed called sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Where we intend to have a fully fleshed out, living, breathing organism of lectures and drop-in groups and webinars and all that kind of stuff, so that at any time, day or night, you can go online and find information or get some support around sex, love, and relationship addiction or related issues. So this webinar that I do every week at 6 o'clock, and by the way, you can also find me every week at 6 o'clock on intherooms.com doing the exact same thing. This is an opportunity. This is the beginning. This is the beginning of our growing this website, sexandrelationshiphealing.com. I believe, and I've gotten some other people to believe, that if we create a community online, that others will want to be there and communicate and support each other. And I think we're ready for that. So that's what we're doing, and it will happen as it happens. I'm here to answer questions. I usually give a little introductory lecture at the beginning just to kind of start things off. Doesn't mean you have to follow in that direction, but it does make people feel comfortable to hear a little bit of expertise to start. Tammy, I hope you like the decoration, because I like the balance of the orchid on the left and so it's worth knocking things over for. I will talk about prodependence since Tammy brought it up. I think that's a great topic to talk about, and not just because I just wrote a book, but because I think it's important to acknowledge that we have had but one way of viewing the treatment of partners and spouses of addicts for a very long time, and that model has been called codependency. It's one that was designed in the 1980s and has been evolved 100 times. Literally, there are probably 120 books over the last 35 years about codependency. It's really hard to understand what exactly was intended in the beginning. So I went back and tried to figure out what the authors of codependency were trying to say and see if it applied to us and if it helped us. And I've really come to believe that there is a better way of supporting spouses than using the codependency model. And so that's what Prodependence is about. I spent the last 3 years obsessing about and writing a book about a different way to support partners and loved ones of all addicts, not just sex and love addicts, because I find its intent aside, which I know was loving and helpful, the reality of where codependency has landed is leaving a lot of people feeling badly about themselves, or like they haven't been the best husband or wife, or like they did it wrong, or like there's something wrong with them and therefore they're involved with an addict. And I just wanted to take away all of that negativity and simply say, hey, you know, you love someone and they're in trouble and they're failing you and they're failing themselves and they're failing your family. And that's enough for you to be crazy about. We don't have to talk to you about your past or what your own issues are, or we can just help you get through this crisis called addiction. And that's a different way than codependency or other models have looked at partners. I think you guys are in crisis. I think that you guys need a lot of loving support. And I think that it is not a time to question your motives, your beliefs, your history, because I don't think that makes any sense. Not that it ever really is necessarily useful. So I am I'm looking at Prodependence as being a model for the treatment of partners of all addicts, so that we can begin, thus professionals can begin to engage with you, partners, in a way that is not blaming, that doesn't assign responsibility, and simply really thanks you for the good work you've done of being a loving partner, and then tries to help you solve the problem you're in, which is living with an active addict. And that's plenty to do. You don't really have to necessarily get into past or trauma or your history, or I just think that's not necessary. So, yeah, and this is a Prodependent workshop we have right here, which means we're going to validate, support, and encourage you. I just saw something came up in a chat, but I know we want to ask questions in the question. I know we already have 4 questions. So if you want to learn more about Prodependence, there's 2 ways. Whoops, I just said 2 ways, Tammy. That's not good. I just said 2 ways.
2, 3.
There are 2 ways. There are 2
day,
ways
Rob.
that you can do that. Maybe I meant 3. There's a Prodependence podcast on sex, love, and addiction. And you can listen to that, and podcasts are free, right? So you can go at any time and listen to that. You can also go to the website for the book, which is prodependence.com. And you'll see a lot of information about a different way to look at the treatment and support of families and partners of addicts. And that's what that piece is all about. So hopefully that's helpful for you. And I want to answer questions because I bet we got a whole bunch. By the way, if you find this helpful, please, the best gift you can give me and to Tammy and to the people that we work with is to send folks to Sex and Relationship Healing. If you go there, you're going to find lectures, you're going to find webinars, you're going to find interaction. And as we continue to move forward, you're also going to find drop-in groups and places to participate and be involved. We are iterative, which means we move slowly and as we can afford it, because everything on Sex and Relationship Healing and everything we're doing here and every blog and every podcast is free. There's no charge to you for any of it. So do support us by encouraging people to be there and participate. That would be really helpful. So questions, Tammy, you got some for us?
Yes, there's some, as always, there's great questions. So sure. First one for the evening is, how do I not be so angry at my husband and question everything daily to help us both in this? Meaning sometimes I want to lash out, but I also want to support him in his recovery. That's a great question. It's
a great question. I would say to you that I don't know how far along you are, and so that makes a difference. For example, if you just found out about his acting out 3 weeks ago and now he's working on his recovery, that's probably very different for you as a spouse than if he's been doing this for 8 months of recovery and you're wanting to be supportive. So I think the question is really different depending on where sort of in the process you are. So let me answer it for both, because that'll be helpful to everyone. I think if you're at the very beginning, which is you found out about your mate's sexual acting out or romantic acting out, and it's far beyond what you ever imagined, and you're feeling devastated, that it is not your job on any level to be supportive of your husband or wife's recovery. In other words, you don't need to feel forgiving or sad or concerned for them because they have an addiction problem. You don't need to necessarily dive in to try to help them. This is something they need to start working on their own. And I don't think that forgiveness is in the cards for probably up to a year. So what is your job as a partner in early recovery is really to begin to get a handle on taking care of yourself, and really nurturing the part of you that you have that is sat in worry and fear about what your husband or wife might be doing for quite a while. The other piece, I think, is also if you have been in this longer, if it's been 8 months or a year since you found out, well then, you know, when you find your anger getting out of control, this is what a partner needs a community for. And I often recommend partners join Al-Anon or COSA, or, I mean, despite my not supporting codependency as a model, I think that partners groups are really important. And anywhere a spouse or a partner can get support, I think is really useful. So And the reason I say that is if you go to a partners group with a therapist or a partners group like Essanon or something like that, you can go and really get really angry about the way you've been harmed, betrayed, wounded, lied to, and manipulated. And then when you go home, some of that anger will be dissipated because you will have shared it with other peers. And so I do think it's really useful and helpful to go somewhere and get support for yourself. I worry when I hear a partner say that they want to not be so angry so that they can be supportive of their husband or wife who's going through recovery. I really think in the early stages, and I mean this in the most loving way possible, I am a sex addict, so I can say this on behalf of all sex addicts. We don't really need your help in the beginning. We need you to take care of yourselves. We need you to focus on being angry at us. We need you to focus on how hurt you are. We need you to focus on how difficult the last period of time has been since. In other words, we need you to really get in touch with what's happened to you during the course of this marriage or relationship so that you can have clarity on where you're at. And it's our job to take care of ourselves as addicts and get ourselves to meetings and get ourselves into recovery and work on it. So you don't have to worry about taking care of my recovery or being the right wife or the right husband for me to recover, because there isn't such a thing. I'm going to get better as a sex addict because I want to, and because I want to be a better man and a better person, and maybe, hopefully, because I want to be a better husband and father. But none of that is going to come about because you have been more understanding, more nice, more kind. Your job may, in fact, be to just be angry at me for a long time. And that's where you can go get support in vending that and getting support for that. So, what I would say to you is, very direct answer to your question, is find other men or women who are in recovery from being involved with a sex addict and talk to them about your anger, talk to them about your fears, talk to therapists who treat partners about this. And that way you will be more balanced in the way that you approach the addict when you come home at the end of the day. But I really want you to know that it is never your responsibility to rescue or take care of an addict. It is never your responsibility, nor should you ever feel that the way you act toward us will lead to our acting out or our staying sober. That's always our decision. So the question for you really has to be, how can I grow? How can I nurture myself? And how can I be a part of this recovery process with my mate, whatever mood I'm in, wherever I'm at? And maybe not so much about not being angry, but more about how do I make my anger effective? How do I say things that are useful and really get across what I'm feeling? Sometimes I've worked with spouses who they're so angry, they just want to say, I hate you, you mofo, and we hear that, but it isn't very productive, and so if there are ways you can say, I hate what happened, and this is where it left me toward you, and I don't know how to heal that pain, or, if you can be more real, if you can find ways to express your pain and your anger in ways that we can be less defensive and hear better, that's a great gift to your marriage and your relationship. So I give a lot of answers, and I don't mean to be overly difficult, but it's not an easy question to answer because a lot depends on, I've worked with spouses who want to forgive someone in the first week. And I've worked with spouses who never want to forgive this person ever and want to persecute him forever, having looked at another woman. And I've worked at everything in between. And so, somewhere in the middle is a slow, gradual forgiveness process that takes place with you getting support and with that other person doing the right stuff that doesn't stir you up again. And that's my best. Tammy, feel free to throw something in if you have a thought.
Well, no, I agree with that. And there's more questions that will kind of continue on with this. So
okay,
I'm
going to grab a piece of paper so I can write something. Because I'm getting old and I forget things.
Okay.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Well, the question is, this is from a couple, and she says, husband had same-sex infidelity, exercises for picking up the pieces and rebuilding trust, or how does a person move on, so to speak? He apparently feels it's dragging on to revisit back and not move on past that. So trying to achieve transparency without hitting roadblocks of raised emotions getting in the way. Good luck with that. And then his comment is, wife keeps digging information and wants to know all the details leading up to ongoing infidelities. why does she do that if she truly wants to move on? So
Okay.
there's kind of the,
I think I can
in a
answer
nutshell. I know you can.
So first of all, partners do what we call investigation work or detective work. And they do it for a number of reasons. They do it, number one, because we've lied to them. And they don't know what's true and what isn't. And wouldn't you want to figure out what the truth is if you've been lied to, especially in a marriage or a close relationship for a number of years? My belief is that spouses and partners are not doing detective work so they can find more reasons to hate you or not believe in you. My belief is that partners are looking and looking and looking through your papers, through your wallet, through your phone, because they want to hope, they're hoping, hope against hope, to not find anything else. They're looking for closure and resolution. But since you've lied to them, they don't fully trust that what you're saying is true. So they're going to look through things and look through things and look through things. It will feel to you like, well, they're just looking to prove that I've done more. Maybe they're looking to prove that you haven't done more. And let's face it, my friend, if you've been lying to your spouse for 6 months or 6 years or 12 years, not likely that he or she is going to be particularly loving or warm toward you, especially if your lying has to do with cheating. And I don't care whether you've been cheating with men or tables or chairs or whatever you've been cheating with, you've been hurting your spouse every time you did it, lying every time you walked out the door, lying every time you came home. And how long were you doing that for? And how long have you been in a relationship? So if you've been lying and cheating on a spouse and telling them something that's not true about your life, like you've been monogamous for 15 years or 10 years, how long do you think it should take a spouse to begin to believe you? Do you think maybe it might take the same amount of time you were lying for them to start to believe you again? Well, most of us wouldn't put up with that. My experience is it can take up to a year or more for you to get the kind of love and acceptance and forgiveness that you're looking for. And even then, there's a process involved, and I would recommend it be one that you bring to therapy, which is something we do called disclosure. And if you see a sex addiction therapist or someone who's trained to do this work, your wife or spouse over time gets to write up a whole list of all of her questions of, well, did you do this? And did you do that? And when we were in New York, did you do this? And they get to have all their questions answered because at the same time, you are working in therapy on a list of everything they don't know. And once you do this process called disclosure, where you both do this with the support of a therapist and people who know what they're doing, there is some assumption that everything is out and on the table. And then for you guys, there'll be a period of grief and a period of, oh my God, is this who we really are and who we really were? And after that comes the beginning of real healing and hope, provided you are not acting out anymore, you are not being defensive, and the person who's been acting out is in an active process of healing, going to therapy, going to 12-step meetings, all of that. So there's a lot of pieces that have to be in place in order for your spouse to get less angry at you and for there to be less of this mistrust. The person who's been sexually acting out has to be in a process of healing. Number two, your spouse has to be in a process of healing of some sort. Number three, there needs to be some way that she will get to ask any question she wants in a supportive, constructed environment, and you will answer whatever she wants to answer at that time fully. We call that disclosure. And then after that, her questions have to be something that are written down, and she can only ask you when you're in therapy or something like that. Because I agree with you, you don't want endless questioning. I wouldn't want to come home every time at the end of a day and hear, well, I wonder if you did that, or I found this number on our phone bill. What does this mean? That constant mistrust is a part of your spouse's grief. It's not just her being a nag or her being difficult. That is the process of her grief, her coming to terms with what you've done, is she's going to question everything for a very long time. And the only resolution to that questioning is A, you've stopped your behavior, B, you're actively working on healing from that behavior, and C, that she knows what's happened. Not the graphic details, but in essence, were you unfaithful 50 times or 1,000 times? Was it with men you knew or with men who were strangers? Was it on the road or was it at home? Was it anyone she knows? These are the kinds of things that a spouse wants to and needs to know, because you shouldn't have secrets from her if you expect to go forward in an intimate relationship. Now, how many times you engaged in a certain sexual act or how big that person's this or that was, that part we don't talk about, because I wouldn't want those memories lingering in your spouse's head. But the degree to which you've cheated and been unfaithful, she has a right to know. And maybe in your case, since you've mostly or only cheated with men, she's going to have a lot of questions about your sexual orientation, as she should. And why have you split yourself in such a way that you have sex with men, but you love a woman who you maybe have sex with occasionally? A lot of my questioning for you would be, do you have sex with other women? Because if you don't, why do you have sex with men but you're married to a woman? So there are a lot of issues here on the table for your wife to parse through. And if you have children, there's even more. And if this has been going on for more than a couple of years and your couple has been together for 20 years or something, there's going to be even more. So here's the answer I have for you as a husband. Be patient. Be very, very patient. You have hurt someone you love deeply, and what you've done cuts them to the quick, and it leaves them feeling like if they couldn't trust you with this, that maybe they can't trust you at all, ever, with anything. It makes spouses believe that nothing you've ever told them is true. And in this case, it's going to make your wife wonder whether you're hiding behind her because you don't want to look at your sexual orientation. So there are many, 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 many questions on the table here to be answered, and they don't resolve in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. This is a year to a year and a half process of active work in therapy for both of you to heal this. And then there's going to be the question, well, what about your attraction to men? And where does that belong in your relationship? And how do you handle that? And, what are you going to do about it? So anyway, I wish I had an easier answer for you, but these are not easy issues for a couple. These are the issues that destroy families, blow them to smithereens. So if you're expecting to hold your relationship and your family together, it's going to take a lot of hard, long-term, intricate work. And for the person who did the sexual acting out, I promise it's going to be more anger you want to deal with, more answers than you want to give, and more time than you want to give it. You're going to want her to get over it and move on so things can just go back to the way they were. Only guess what? Things are never going to go back to the way they were, nor should they. And so you're going to have to find a new path for you and she to love each other if that's where you're headed. And that just doesn't happen in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And that's provided you're both in therapy, you're both working on things, you're both got 12-step support, and everything's in place. So here's my suggestion to you as a husband, as it is to every husband that I've ever worked with, is if I were you, I would turn to your wife and I would say, I cannot believe the pain that you're going through. I can't imagine what I was thinking to have caused you this. And I'm so grateful that you're willing to be with me even for another moment, no less for potentially a long period of time. And I promise you to not react or get angry at you when you get angry or upset or have questions. I'm going to be an open vessel to support you, and we're going to have a process of disclosure where you get to ask anything you want. That's, they say in 12-step program, I remember hearing this many years ago. Tammy, this will make you laugh. But I remember working with some people who talked about addicts needing to have an attitude of gratitude. And I got to tell you, for a sex addict and a love addict, what that means is that I need to have an attitude of extreme and profound gratitude that this person hasn't left me, hasn't divorced me, is still sitting around trying to figure this out. I think that's something to be incredibly grateful for, that they simply haven't even left. So anything beyond their not having left, or hitting you, they get permission to be angry as long as they want to, as hurt as long as they want to, as long as you're both in an active process of healing, which is available to you if you're willing to take it. Thanks.
And I just want to tag on to that. I want to give you hope that it's worth it. I know so many couples that have made it through this journey, and though it was really painful along the way, they are so grateful that they sustained and held on. And regardless of whether they stayed together, even just going through the process, they've taken that information and gotten rid of the baggage. It's like, I can't imagine leaving a relationship and jumping into another one, with all the stuff, the baggage of this. So I want to give you hope that there is hope. There is help, and get the support, and it can be totally worth it.
I want to say one more thing about a process we call disclosure, which is something that happens when you have worked for many months with a therapist and your spouse has worked for many months with peers and or a therapist to build support, and she gets to ask all her questions and you get to answer them. It isn't until that happens that some of her demanding and questioning and is going to stop, because She just doesn't know what's happened. And I hate to tell you this, but she doesn't trust you and she doesn't believe you. She thinks everything you say is a lie because you've been lying for a long time. And so until she begins to regain a sense of trust, you are, my friend, in the doghouse. So let me just say, I'll promote my work. I wrote a book called Out of the Doghouse, and I wrote it for you, sir, to understand what it takes for you to heal this wound of betrayal with your wife. If you want to, I would suggest going and getting a copy. Here's how it usually goes, because men don't read self-help books, is your wife will buy Out of the Doghouse, and she will read it, and then she will throw it at you, as she should. And my hope is you will not throw it in the trash, but you'll pick it up and read it. And you might begin to come to understand how incredibly grateful you might be for the fact that she's still with you, because lots of people wouldn't be. So Tammy, please go ahead.
Okay, and the next question is about disclosure. So this is a woman who is the spouse of a sex addict, and they're preparing for disclosure. Aside from working with my CSAT, that's great. It sounds like you have your therapist and he has his. Do you have any book recommendations or helpful websites?
Well,
there isn't a lot that has been written about disclosure.
Well, I think I will say this. Hang in there with us, if you will, because the next group that I really want to get up and running as soon as I can is a drop-in group for spouses and partners. And I think the best thing that you can do is get your own support from other peers, other women who've experienced betrayal, other people who are experiencing mistrust, because having that support at your back is golden. And I don't care how beautiful, successful, amazing a woman you are. If your man has cheated on you extensively, you're going to doubt yourself. It just comes with the territory. And it's such a beautiful thing for you to be able to be in a short little group with another woman and look across the room and see another attractive, interesting woman and see that that happened to her also. It just takes so much of the heat off of you. And so the only thing I would recommend is make sure that you have loving support of a group of women, peers in your life who've been through this, so that you can turn to them, you know, after disclosure, that you can turn to them at any point in the process and make sure that you get your needs met. Because, and this is something I want to say to every partner in the room, you know, I'm in a marriage. I've been married for 18 years. And when I have a bad day or a good day or whatever I have in my day, there is one person and one person only who's the first person who gets that information, and that is my spouse. Because that's who I want to share my life with. That's who I've chosen to share my life with. And that's who I want feedback from. And then I will reach on to friends and other family. But I can't wait till he comes home in the evening. I say a little prayer for you. You know, I can't wait till he comes home so we can talk about our day. So, you know, unfortunately, when your spouse is the person who's hurt you the most, you can no longer, for the most part, at least in the beginning, turn to him or her and say, oh, let me tell you what's going on, or because you don't trust them, you don't believe in them, and they've hurt you. Your job in this process is to not only get ready for disclosure, but make sure that you have other women who you can turn to who are going through what you're going through, so that when you get that disclosure, you can spend some time processing it and get feedback from peers, from other women. Because look at it this way, when you do disclosure, you're going to hear some of the most hurtful things and that you may have experienced in your life. And also it will be a relief. Both of those things will happen at the same time, I guarantee you. I've been through lots of disclosures. But where do you go then? Who do you turn to say, oh my God, I've been through the most hurtful and hopefully healing experience of my life today? You've got to have a group of other women to turn to who will say, hey girl, I got your back. Other women have been cheated on. Other women are involved with people like me, other addicts. You don't want to be alone with this pain and then have the only one to turn to at the end of the evening be the person who caused you that pain. So your job is to find peer support so that you can really be ready to go through this experience. Let me also briefly say for the group what disclosure is, because everyone might know what she's talking about. If you're working with experts in sex, sexual impulsivity, sex addiction, and we are certified to do this work or have some licensure in this work, we are trained to bring you together as a couple to take the air out of the tire of secrecy. And so we are there in part in the beginning of your healing process to make sure that both of you have cleared all the secrets that you have on the table so that you can have a fresh start. And let me say this very clearly, because there is sometimes confusion about this. we do disclosure. I completely believe in the process of disclosure from a cheater to the person who's been cheated on, provided the person who's been cheated on is mentally healthy enough to hear it, provided that there's a process in place. They both have support, they both have groups, they both have therapy, and provided, you know, that the spouse isn't physically ill or 7 months pregnant, or, you know, you need to be safe. And then there needs to be a follow-up process for that you guys are going to go through afterward so that you can heal this. In my field, we do disclosure on a regular basis, and it is one of the most healing processes I can see in the coupleships that we work with, because then there's no more, wait, did you do this? Or 4 years ago when we were on a vacation, you left for an hour, and I wonder now, that can just get cleared up. And that level playing field of honesty is really where the beginning of the healing of the relationship starts, or restarts, I should say. Is that helpful, Tammy?
It is. So yeah, and that's been my experience too, that people who go through a good, well-prepared disclosure are great. It was over 90% are grateful that they had done that and found it to be very healing. That is if the behavior has actually stopped. So people that try to do disclosure and then, you know, that's just a blip, and yeah, I didn't do anything today, and then go on their merry way. That doesn't work so well. So, okay, ready for the next one?
I am.
How do you let go of all the hurt and anger? This person is a woman who got separated from her ex 5 months ago, and she's still caught in all of the hurt and anger. And she doesn't want to give him the power over her.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I can give you a different way to look at it. I think you're grieving. When you separate from someone you love, when they've hurt you deeply, you're going to be grieving. And even if you're angry and you're glad you separated and the reasons were sound for separating, you're still going to grieve the meaning and all of the things that all of your hopes, all of your dreams, all of what you wanted in that relationship, they're all going to be there for a while. And you know, so I really would encourage you. I want to go back to this question really quick just to take a look at it. Tammy, can you read? There was a part of it that I wanted to write.
The question.
Yeah, I'm looking to see.
How do you let go of all the hurt and anger? I feel that it's taking over my life.
Right. So I don't think you can. I think you're going to be hurt and angry for a really long time. You love this person. They broke your heart. They broke your home. They broke your trust. And I have not seen people recover from that in less than a year. What I have seen, you know, so what I think you need to acknowledge, or it might be helpful, is that you are grieving, that you're not giving anything away to him with your hurt and your anger and your fear. You know, I'd like to think, well, I can just walk away from them and just forget them, and they screwed up my life, and now I'll go out and have a good life. Well, that would be true if we weren't human. But to be human is to be attached, and to be attached and lose that attachment is to grieve. And it doesn't matter whether you're losing him because he hurt you and you're doing the right thing for leaving, or whether he left you. It doesn't matter. Losing is losing. Breaking an attachment is breaking an attachment. So what I would suggest is, you know, you consider letting yourself love him and think about the love that you had for him, because that's where the pain and the loss is coming from. It's not from what he did to you. It's from the parts that were good. And until you acknowledge that there were really good parts, really good reasons why you married, why you stayed together, why you got together, and that there's a loss there that's going to hurt for a long time, regardless of why you're breaking up or how hurt you've been, there was something there that's not there anymore. And that's going to hurt for a while. So if you can give yourself permission to not see your pain and your revisiting this and your, you know, lack of healing as being something wrong with you, for he hurt you and he doesn't deserve this pain, but rather see it as well, I'm sorry, dog, you have to surrender, okay? My dog is pulling on my arm. Here's how I would look at it. Here's how I suggest you look at it. I always love the metaphor of a glass bottle with a little bit of soap in it. If you've ever had a glass or a bottle with a little bit of laundry soap in it, or soap from the dish soap, and you try to get the soap out, the first time you kind of shake it up and it's got all these bubbles, and you pour the water out, and then you pour some more water in, you shake it up, and it still has a whole bunch of bubbles. And this can happen for a long time before all the soap gets out. And I would say the same thing to you. Your grief process is going to take a while. And you don't just toss that man out and say, okay, I'm done with all the pain and hurt and suffering he caused me, because he's gone. The pain and hurt and suffering are inside of you. And that's something you need to be kind and loving to yourself about, because it's not about him or how he treated you. It's about losing something that was important to you at one time, which you're still hurting over. And you need to give yourself permission to hurt over that. Yeah.
Okay. And so somebody asked about the drop-in groups for partners. I'm working on the calendar for October, yes. And all of those options, I'm praying I get it all done this week so that it's posted. But otherwise, if you have registered on the website, if you're receiving emails from us, you'll be notified of when those are. But I have identified a person. She's great, and she's going to be doing the drop-in groups and on a weekly basis. So watch for information. I think they're going to be on, I think we decided Wednesdays, but don't hold me to do that because I've had a lot of calendar things. So the next question.
Let me just comment on that really quickly. We're going to do different things for partners. So there'll be a drop-in group where you can just, and it won't look like this. You'll see each other's faces if you wish, or, you can cover your screen, but it's
right.
going to be interactive.
Yes.
The drop-in groups will be interactive. So you get to talk to other spouses, see other spouses, and they will be monitored. So should someone odd or weird get in the room, or should someone get too carried away, we can hold on to that and keep it a safe space for you. That's this kind of stuff that Tammy's working on. So yeah, if you sign up on the site, we will get there. We're getting there.
Yeah, we are. We're making huge progress. We've got more.
And we want the right people.
Kind of things. Yes. And we've got more of these kind of events, coming up. I'll talk more about those. So this one's a chain. So hanging with me. This person is a woman who said her husband wants her to do certain sexual acts every week, but he can't make love. He's aggressive. He uses bad language. And she said, I'm not sure if letting him get always is helping him. But then she continues, this has been going on for a long time. He's in his early 60s. He uses porn and masturbation. The question is, should I have sex every day with him? And if the age of a sex addict makes difference. And then she also indicates that he's had unprotected sex with prostitutes and should protect his secrets from his. So that's a lot. So, but I wanted you to have the whole picture.
Okay. Well, I wish I could give you a hug, because if you were here, I would give you a big hug. I am so sorry about all of that. And, what I really, really believe is that you need support. I can't think of, I've been through situations in groups and individual where a spouse or a partner or a wife feels that it's her responsibility to keep her husband sexually satisfied. It's her responsibility. Some people feel that it's a religious or spiritual responsibility. Others feel that it's the duty of the spouse. And I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong. But I will say that if you're married to a sex addict, then you're probably being abused. That the sex you're having or being asked to have every single day or every other day or however often you are being asked to have it is probably not so much about you, but more about you're being used. And I think you probably know that, because you're not saying what you want. You didn't say, well, I like having sex once or twice a week and he likes, you just said, how do I respond to his demands? And to me, that feels like you're being abused. That's what that feels like to me. I remember not that long ago, I was running a group for drug addicts and alcoholics. But I'm always the guy who's talking about sex, right? And I went around that group as I was finishing. I was only there for a week. This is a true story. And I got to ask different people in the group, this drug and alcohol group, what was it like having someone in here talking about sex? And, people said whatever they said. But at the end of the group, this is absolutely true. There was this woman in her late 50s, early 60s, and this was in a fairly conservative state where I was doing some work. And she looked at me and she said, I didn't understand why this guy who talks about sex would be in my alcohol group, because This woman was in her third treatment for alcoholism. In other words, she'd been in for a month, and then a year or two later, she was back in, and then she could not get sober. But in the group that day, she said, but I'm beginning to wonder, listening to you manage this group all week. She said, I wonder if the fact that I am in my third round of alcohol treatment has anything to do with the fact that my husband makes me look at porn and forces me to have sex with him every day. So I was talking to a woman who, in my belief system, is being raped by her husband, who feels because of her beliefs that she does not have the ability to say no. And then she's questioning why she's struggling with alcohol. Well, let me tell you, I know why she's struggling with alcohol, but no one had brought up to her that she could say no to her husband, or that she had a right to say, I need to be sexual when I feel comfortable. And so I think a lot of the questions you're asking have more to do with your figuring out what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel comfortable, what kind of sex, if any, you want to have with someone who's having unsafe. Like, do you want to have sex with someone who is having unsafe sex with other people? Here's my best advice for partners, and I give this a lot, and I think it's great advice, and not just because I give it. Partners often ask me, when do you think I should start being sexual with him or her again, after the disclosure, after the cheating, after the work's been done, after we get into some kind of healing? When would it be right? And my answer is always the same, which is, I suggest you begin to be sexual with him or her again when you trust him or her again. Because we shouldn't have sex with people we don't trust. It isn't healthy. I don't give money to people I don't trust. I don't spend time with people I don't trust. I don't go to dinner with people I don't trust. Why would I open the most personal and private parts of my body and soul to someone I don't trust, no matter how long I've lived with him or her? So one of the things I would suggest you do is get yourself a therapist, maybe someone who's trained in this work, and write Tammy a note. One of the reasons, by the way, all of you, that Tammy's here is because when you write me or you write us, she will get all of that email. And so, you might write her a note and say, I'm confused. I'm very angry at him, but he keeps wanting to have sex, and where is the boundary, and how can I set it, and what is good for me? And, I would be more focused on what is healthy for you than what is okay to do with him and not. It sounds like your husband has no problem having sex with whomever, whenever he wants, including you. My question is, when do you want to be sexual with him, or do you? Do you feel, or are you just sexual with him to hopefully keep him satisfied so that he won't go out with someone else? Because that's a trait that spouses have, of being sexual when they don't want to, because they fear being cheated on, or they fear if they're not having enough sex that this person's going to go out on them. And I got to tell you, if your husband's going to go out on you, he's going to go out on you whether you have sex with him or not. So I really feel like you need to get your own world right for yourself, to get your own sense of what you want to do and when you want to do it and why you want to do it around sex and love with him before, I wouldn't be asking questions about, I don't think it's useful or helpful for you to say, what's the right number of times I should have sex with my husband in order to XYZ. I think the question is, how do you feel about your husband? How warm, loving, and sexual do you feel toward him? Do you feel like sex is an obligation rather than a response? And are you afraid that if you're not sexual with him, he'll go out and be sexual with others? Because none of those things are reasons to be sexual with someone. And I feel like there's some healing that you need to do for yourself so that you can set a boundary meaning some kind of agreement with him about when it's okay and when it isn't. And I have a feeling you're going to find out you don't want to have nearly as much sex with him as he wants to have with you. My question is, how do you learn to say no and have that no be a no that's okay, that you can live with?
Okay. So this one is from a partner. I guess a wife. Do Christian sex addiction therapists usually work from a different model or process? My husband is going to one who is a CAP, and I can't even remember which one that is, and does not belong to any association by a partner model. Oh, I think I know which one it is, or APSATs. He does have an addiction therapy group every week. After my husband has been going to him for 3 months, his therapist doesn't feel I should be part of my husband's recovery. I'm going to a CSAT with APSATs, and my husband's been pushing back, saying that I need to stay on my side of the road. He chose his therapist to help his higher power. I'm frustrated and getting more resentful. So clearly this isn't working.
Okay, so what we have for everybody and for the group to generalize is a spouse who feels that she is being shut out of her husband's recovery and told that she just needs to do her own recovery and he needs to do his. And you know, in a world of, let's say, alcoholism, where he was drinking and you were a partner and you were affected by his drinking, I might buy into that. I might say, well, maybe you have work to do to get support for you and he needs to get sober and you'll support each other, but you also have separate processes to do and they may not be ones that are informed. In other words, you may not exactly know what he's doing, all of that. But we're not talking about alcohol or drugs. We're talking about sexuality. We're talking about something so personal, so intimate, so meaningful for a relationship that it is not okay for him to just say, well, I'll do my program and you do yours. And I don't agree with a therapist who says, you know, that spouse needs to be shut out of the process. But I want to remind you, because I've done this work for a very long time. I've been doing sex addiction work for almost 30 years. I run into a few husbands who say, well, my therapist says that you don't need to be involved and you shouldn't this or that. But when you really talk to that therapist, that's not what they said at all. In other words, are you hearing the words of your husband's therapist through him without confirming it through them? That would be a question I would have, because addicts have a tendency to shade the truth when they are annoyed or irritated and don't want necessarily, and well, let me try this. Addicts have a way of shading the truth when we want to get our way. And if my way is I want my spouse to shut up about all of this, I might just say, well, my therapist said it's none of your business. So now you have a conflict that needs to be resolved in therapy with your therapist and his therapist and the two of you. The way to resolve this issue is to sit in a room with your therapist and his therapist and the two of you and hash all of this out. My belief is you have a right to know everything that he's done and everything that's gone on in his life related to his sexual behavior that might have affected you. But it is not your right necessarily to ask everything that happened in group every night he comes home from group, because a lot of times that is about other people. It's not really your right to demand every day, have you acted out today? Have you acted? In other words, you need to have boundaries. But to be shut out utterly sounds like, if I were you, I would be upset. I would be thinking, well, this is just like it was. I don't get to know anything and I'm shut out, and I was shut out when he was cheating, so I don't want to be shut out when he's healing, and you're absolutely right. So I don't think it's a matter of your having the right to know what's going on with him. I absolutely think you do. I think it's about how do you set it up so that you can open that door. Because either your husband has slammed it in your face or his therapist has. And in either case, that's not okay, or it wouldn't be okay with me. And, you know, I don't know the kind of training your husband's therapist has. You said it was faith-based. It's not unusual in faith-based communities for spouses to be given a lot more responsibility for a man's sexual behavior. In other words, it's not unusual in a faith-based environment for someone to say, well, if you had more sex with him, he wouldn't be doing this. Or if you were just more open to him, he wouldn't be doing this. Or after all, it is your job to keep your man happy. That does happen, unfortunately, in some more conservative environments. And if that's the tone that is being struck in your husband's therapy, it's not productive for your marriage. So I hope that you find a way to get the four of you in a room and sit down and talk about this issue, because it's not going to go away for you. And it needs to be resolved. And you have every right to resolve it.
Okay, this is from someone: as an adult child whose stepfather was a sex and drug addict, I watched my mother cater to his every need and do everything and anything she could to keep the peace and deny any and all of her needs. I saw as a victim through this. Consequently, I got a victim mentality, and in many ways continued to feel sorry for her. How does your codependency approach help the children who grew up in these dynamics?
Tammy, can you reinterpret that question in a more direct way?
Sure. So adult child, does codependency address adult children, or is it just for the partner and spouse?
Codependence is a book that I wrote to look at the actions and the love that spouses and partners give from a different perspective than codependency. And I simply wanted to say that spouses and partners don't need to be assigned a label that makes them as sick as the addict in order to get a partner into treatment or in order to carry out treatment. I think it's enough to say to a partner, wow, you've really loved somebody and stuck in there with someone who's hurt you, who's let you down, who's broken their vows and promises, and that must be really hard on you. And let's start from there, rather than looking at something wrong with someone who's been actively cheated on. So in terms of codependence for children of an addict, codependence, like codependence, is about the nature of your active relationship with an addict. If you're not in relationship with an addict today, I don't think it's so much about that. Codependence is really written for, it's written for people who are in an active relationship with an addict. That's what it's written for, whether it's a sex addict, a drug addict, and it's written in order to help remove the stigma and the negative labels that get applied to spouses who I believe are really just doing their best to love a husband or a wife or a mother or a father, but they get called codependent, they get called enabling, they get called enmeshed, they get called all these really nasty names that I don't think really apply to someone who's grown up with or has married someone who's profoundly addicted. So I don't know, if you have found help with codependency, then probably you will find help with prodependence. The difference is simply this. Under codependence, we say that partners and family members are acting out of their own trauma and that they're making the addiction problem worse. And in prodependence, what we say is anybody married to someone who's acting this way is bound to show signs of their own trauma and their own wear and tear, and they're going to look a little bit like crazy people, but that's not because they're bad or broken or addicts, you partners. It's because you're deeply hurting, deeply vulnerable, and deeply wounded. And even if and so that's really what it's about. And I'm not sure if I really answered the question.
You did a great job of explaining what that is. So, so if sex addicts use porn and sex when acting out, what do love addicts do when they act out? That's good for helping distinguish between. Yeah.
So, I am a sex addict, as many of you may know. Otherwise, I wouldn't know so much about this from the inside out and the outside in. And it was a very interesting thing when I had gone through about 10 years of recovery in sex addiction, I became a love addict. In other words, sex addicts objectify people's body parts. It's like meaning, if I'm a sex addict, I'm thinking, oh, that butt, those breasts, those arms, that's going to fix me. That's going to make me feel powerful and exciting and wonderful. And I really want to get into all that. And if I have sex with that person, it's just going to be amazing. And much like a drug addict thinks, well, once I get those drugs in my system, I'm going to be excited and powerful and having fun and laughing. And, it's all about the idea of what I might get in addiction. It's about anticipation and fantasy. So if you're a love addict, it's really about projecting the idea of what you want in love and from love onto a person that you have not gotten to know well enough to see if they can actually offer you what you're looking for. It means you've objectified that person, only you're not objectifying their butt or their boobs or their arms. What you're objectifying is their love, their lovingness. You're objectifying you're romanticizing them. And there really is no difference between love addiction and sex addiction in the sense that you're both love addicts and sex addicts are living in the fantasy of who that other person is rather than the reality of who that other person is. Is there more to that question, Tammy, that I can answer? Because I feel like I started it, but I didn't finish it.
No, they just wanted to know what the addictive behaviors would be for a love addict. So
okay, so let me say that. A love addict will be calling him or her constantly, worried about where they are, wanting to make sure they're around, trying to make sure that everything stays positive and there isn't anything negative, and just really working to keep that person that other person, that partner, in a place where you feel actively loved and attended to all the time. And the minute that person looks away from you, you start to worry, get anxious, and try to find ways to bring them back to you because you need that attention to feed your soul because it is empty. And sex addicts need sex to feed their souls because they're empty. Love addicts need to feel like they're constantly being adored and loved to fill up that empty place. Tammy, before you go on to ask what is probably going to be the last question tonight, I just want to remind you guys why we're here and what we're doing here. We're evolving a website called sexandrelationshiphealing.com. The goal of that site is to offer to you free, at no cost, drop-in groups, support groups, lectures, webinars, and any activity that you or an addict or a partner can find toward their healing. In other words, I've spent 30 years developing treatment for sex, love, and relationship disorders, for intimacy disorders. And my goal is to take every piece of that healing that I can and put it online for people to get for free. So if you know someone who's struggling, if you are someone who's struggling, if you want to be supportive to us, it won't cost you a dime. Just put your name on our mailing list, and that way you will be able to hear about all the stuff we're doing, and we will be able to grow this community, which is our goal. The goal is not about us. The goal is about you finding each other and getting the support you need without necessarily having to walk into some, schoolhouse basement in the middle of the night to go to some group you've never been to. Last question of the night.
Okay, and so I'm going to type some answers to the ones that are.
I mean, there were some cool ones in there. I did peek on your questions, and there were some that were kind of about sex or about.
Oh, there's
one in there that was kind of kinky that I wanted to answer.
And then go ahead and scroll, and you find the one you want to answer.
So,
the very bottom one was specifically about sex. So
go for it.
Well, I don't know if that was the one you were asking. So.
Oh, no, this was a while ago. It's no big deal. Just ask whichever one you want.
Well, okay. I was going to ask one that was probably okay. Where do I draw the line with your wanting to support the spouse victim when part of that loving support of her partner includes sacrificing the children to the nightmare abuse, both physical and sexual, along with enmeshing the children in the victimization? In some case, it seems like continuing to support becomes a form of child abuse.
There's nothing in codependency that says you have to stay with someone or take any kind of abuse whatsoever, and I would not abdicate that or support that in any way. What I'm interested in is in supporting partners in not being blamed or labeled for having stuck by somebody who hurt them. I want partners to be celebrated for their willingness to hang in there with someone they love, even though that person has hurt them. But I am not an advocate for abuse. I'm not an advocate for violence, and I'm certainly not an advocate for leaving yourself in a situation where you or your children are being victimized. And there isn't anybody in the sexual recovery community that I know of who would want to encourage you to stay in a situation where you or your children are coming to harm in any way. So I'd like to know personally, in fact, I would love it if you in particular, I don't know who you are, write Tammy a note because I'd like to support you further. I'm concerned hearing that question that you're probably allowing yourself to experience a lot more abuse and harm than anybody would recommend. And I don't want to see anybody in that situation. Yeah. Anything else we want to ask, Tammy? Or?
Well, there's more questions, but we're at time's up. So for those of you that didn't get your questions answered, reach out via the website or come back next week, Monday. The other thing I wanted to mention is David Fawcett will have a spot this Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. There was information that was sent out about that. If you're not on our mailing list, I highly encourage you to get on the email list. You can register we don't sell the mailing list. It really is just so that you're informed about what the webinars and drop-in groups, that are coming up will be. And the podcast, you mentioned them briefly, but we launched another new podcast last Thursday. So check that out on the site. But yeah, resources on lots of resources on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, and we'll continue to add more. So,
and let me, if I can, just say a moment of Dr. Fawcett. Dr. Fawcett's expertise is in two areas. It's in HIV/AIDS, and it's also in methamphetamine and chemsex, so sex that's been combined with drugs. So if there are people who struggle with alcohol and sex, with speed and sex, with any kind of issue that involves sexuality and drugs, even if you move from one to another, like you were drinking and using and you stopped and then you started acting out sexually, Dr. Fawcett's group would be a great place to stop in. And if you are a gay or lesbian person who's been affected by HIV/AIDS or has been affected by the challenges in that community related to addiction, Dr. Fawcett is an awesome person to hang out with. And remember, all of this is free. You know, we don't charge you. David gives his time. I'm calling on all my famous friends to try to give you their time for free because I can do that. And so I'm going to try. And Dr. Fawcett is one of those people. Anyway, thank you all for being here. I am on In the Rooms every Friday at 6. I do this group every Monday at 6. California time, and we will be evolving this to more groups, more activities as every week that goes by. So thank you to my compadre Tammy.
And I'm there's somebody that just popped a question on here, and it's not too late. It's never too late, because they're saying, you know, it's too late, blah, blah, blah. It's never too late.
No, I mean, but I give you a little Jewish guilt? I mean, I will have to wait a few more minutes for my dinner, and I am hungry. But for you, I'll answer it.
No. The question was, I think it's too late. I've ruined everybody's lives. And I'm going, no, there's always hope. There's help. Email me and I'll give you some resources. That's all.
Oh, wait, I want to see that question.
These lessons are so poignant, seem a little too late for me. I'm a sex and love addict. My dreams for a happy life are now ended. And
okay, so let me just tell you this. It's never too late for love. Never, never, never. Now, I will tell you this, and I'm going to stop. Love may not come in the form you're looking for it. I know that the love I wanted at 23 is different than the love I want at 57, and is probably different than the love I'm going to get at 70. But love is all around you, my friend, and all you have to do is open your arms, and we're here. You know, we're all here for you. Okay. Thank you, Tammy, for your time, and we will talk again next week.
All right, sounds good. Bye.
Thank you all. Have a great week.